Russian troops who had taken control of an airbase in Crimea fired warning shots on Tuesday. This is around 300 Ukrainian soldiers who previously manned an airfield there. They demanded their jobs back. Tensions continuing to run high in the Black Sea Peninsula since Russian troops tightened their grip over the weekend on the Crimean Peninsula. And the U.S. formally announcing an aid package of $1 billion in energy subsidies to the Ukraine. Some of the updates right now on this situation, which of course is developing and evolving by the minute. Joining me right now to discuss the unraveling situation briefly before we move on to those poll results is David Patten, Newsmax Magazine Senior Editor, and J.D. Hayworth. Gentlemen, it's great to have you here with us. David, late yesterday, the United States prepared to impose those sanctions on Russia. We were talking just a moment ago with Michael Rubin. What do you think about this move? You think this is going to be enough?
I think to really affect the behavior of Vladimir Putin, and let's make no mistake, all of the marvels right now are over what's going to happen next in the East Ukraine. But to really impact him, you have to hit him where he feels it. And I think that's going to have to involve probably fast-track membership for, say, Georgia and or Ukraine into NATO, although that does have obligations that have to be very carefully taken into account. I think also we may need to suggest that we're going to revisit the question of these the missile shield that we had previously canceled both in Poland and the Czech Republic. That will get his attention.
Yeah, and JD, if we do backtrack on our backtrack with Poland, is that something that can, the Polish people would be welcoming with open arms after we kind of publicly embarrass them?
Well, let's take a look at that situation. There has long been the notion, and indeed almost the reflex, that the American nation, the American nuclear umbrella will protect us. You know from speaking with Lech Walesa how the Solidarity movement looked to America for inspiration. And while there might be a bumpy road initially, the Poles and their distrust of the Russians is legendary, and it's legion among the Polish people. So while there might be some turbulence and a little heartburn at first, sure, I think in the final analysis they would be very happy to have those weapons on their soil.
David.
And if I could jump in there, I agree with J.D. And one of the things we've seen in previous presidential administrations is that they're able to rally the Euro nations, whether it's going into the first Iraq War, the second Iraq War, even Bill Clinton, Kosovo. And yet, so far in this administration, everything is leading from behind. Well, the Euros won't support us. Angela Merkel won't support us, so therefore we have no options. Therefore, there's nothing we can do. If you define yourself as helpless in the world community, then naturally that's how you're going to be perceived. This administration needs to go forward, step out there, get with Poland, get with Germany, get with the Ukraine, and say, what is it we can do as the leaders of NATO, as the leaders of this operation, to move things forward and to protect the Ukraine.
And going back to that conversation we had with Lech Walesa, he said that the Polish people and most people around the world still look to the United States as the world's lone remaining superpower. He also highlighted that he was also, like many of us, disappointed with the president's response, not just in the Ukraine, but in other situations as well. But that appetite, that desire is still there for America to be the voice of reason, also, the powerful nation, but the just nation as well, because we know Putin is not that nation. Maybe powerful in some ways, but not just.
Well, here you have the situation where the rest of the world might use different terminology, but we're talking about American exceptionalism. Now, it does not mean that America needs to be the policeman of the world. It is, however, true that despite all the rhetoric and despite all the seeming hostility of the moment, long-term relationships in a post-World War II world, through the Cold War, through the advent of a new century into the threat of Islamo-fascism and Islamo-terrorism, nations of the world, especially Europe, look to the United States, and especially those nations of Eastern Europe, those former Soviet satellites. Our British cousins from time to time may disagree, and, well, the French are the French. But the Polish and the other Eastern European nations still expect a strong America.
Yeah, David, you were talking about the ability of the American president, the commander-in-chief, not specifically this guy, but in past, to build a consensus among the European nations and other nations as well. How does this differ from those two specific examples you gave, the run-up to the first Gulf War and then the second Gulf War.
Yeah. So in this case, the administration came in, and what was really the first thing they did? They undercut our allies, Poland and Czechoslovakia, and said that, and those political leaders had put their nation's reputation on the line with communities within their countries that did not want American missiles stationed on their soil. And the first thing they did was they basically undercut them. They cut a deal with Russia, and they said, we're going to pull everything out. You know, we didn't even get anything in that deal. Usually when you cancel a major program that's of great interest to your geopolitical opponent, you at least get something in return. We didn't do that. We walked away. American power has been receding ever since. So why would American allies now believe that if America says that it'll back them up, that it'll really do it? That's our problem. We have a credibility problem right now.
All right, let's keep our eye on the Ukraine. We'll be watching that throughout the show. But I do want to transition real quickly and talk about the meeting that happened yesterday in the Oval Office with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and President Obama. Here is a clip from Benjamin Netanyahu talking about the situation in Israel and what he would like to see happen to forge a more stable peace process in the Mideast.
In the Middle East, which is definitely the most turbulent and violent part of the earth, the only peace that will endure is a peace that we can defend. And we've learned from our history, Jewish history, but I think from general history, that the best way to guarantee peace is to be strong. And that's what the people of Israel expect me to do, to stand strong against criticism, against pressure, stand strong to secure the future of the one and only Jewish state. And I think there is a partnership between Israel and America that I think is important for this end. I want to thank you again for your friendship and your hospitality and the warmth you show me on this snowy Washington day. Thank you. It's good to see you again. Appreciate it.
I was kind of struck by the comments yesterday, not just those specific comments, but what preceded those comments immediately, almost as if Netanyahu was pleading with the president there in a very public way to kind of grab this, horse by the reins and take control of the situation, and giving an example of how he's doing that, or trying to do that at least in the Middle East. Benjamin Netanyahu so adroit at using those words in such an effective manner. It
was interesting for me during Netanyahu's first stint as prime minister. He addressed a joint session of Congress. I had to finish up a meeting with constituents, came in a little late. One of the senators had left, so I went front and center there in the congressional chamber. Netanyahu is a remarkable communicator. And he took the opportunity at yesterday's photo op to make it very clear to AIPAC, the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, very powerful in domestic politics on both sides of the aisle, but also to the people back home and to President Obama. And he was so diplomatic, talking about the experience of Israel. He could have really put it in the president's face by saying, it's not only been our experience, but Mr. President, the first man to hold the job that you hold, General Washington, said the best way to keep the peace is to prepare for war. He chose to back off. So the genius of Netanyahu is an ability to speak persuasively and, yes, diplomatically, to convey the point with an aura of respect, even with thank you for this courteous welcome on this snowy Washington day. My thoughts went back to our president's temper tantrum in his first term when he excused himself from a meeting with Netanyahu, went to the family quarters and had dinner, and had the leader of a sovereign state, an ally of the United States, cooling his heels downstairs at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. Netanyahu wrapped all of that up with a speech of subtlety before those cameras and to the president.
And we'd encourage everybody to go to whitehouse.gov and watch the full press conference. Very telling, and at least showing that one person in that room has a grasp on the situation in the Middle East right now. Dave will have much more coming up ahead. Closer look at what Hillary and some of the hurdles that she faces as she prepares for 2016. We'll be right back with more here on America's Forum. I'm John Bachman. You can connect to us on social media. Here are our contact information, JohnB_Newsmax, and any of us here at the program at Newsmax TV. We'll get JD up there very soon. We can talk to him
We got
directly.
that handle coming.